Hi and welcome back to my channel. It's kickoff for block number 3 of our 2025 Sew With Me series. I hope you are all enjoying the Sew With Me series, sew along so far and learning something new. Don't forget to join our Facebook group. I'll have a link for that below and you can share all of your progress there and see what other people are making. Today we're going to be working on block number 3. If you've missed any of my previous videos, I have created a playlist on my header page here on YouTube. You can click that and get to all of those block releases so far. So here is what block number 3 looks like. Again, I'm using fabric left over from my Believe bundle that I released with my Christmas Spools quilt. And so it's going to be Christmassy and just a lot of fun. And I have this fun low volume for my background. You can do a solid for your background, of course, or any color that you want. But I've really been enjoying putting low volumes on my backgrounds. I think it makes it just a little extra cozy. So this block is really easy. It's a bunch of half square triangles. You can actually lay this block out pretty much any way you want. Let's go ahead and get started with today's tutorial. All right, these are all of the pieces we're going to need for today's video. I've got all my pieces labeled and set out. These are little alphabetties and I just have them on a design board. So I'm gonna go ahead and set these aside. We're going to be making 4 at a time half square triangles today. So we're gonna start off with our C, D, E, and F fabrics. We're gonna take our C fabrics and we're going to place a D right side down. We're going to sew all the way around all 4 sides using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to come back and we're going to cut on the diagonal to make 4 half square triangles. Now we're going to do that with all of these fabrics. So I like to just get them all ready beforehand. So I'm going to go ahead and just stack them all up and bring them to my machine. And one thing that you may want to do, and you can either do it now or you can do it before you cut them, is either pre-starch your fabric or use a little bit of Mary Ellen's Best Press on these because we are going to be cutting on the bias. And I did talk about the bias in a previous video, but just in case, the fabric has a grain. And so if you're pulling along the grain on this particular one runs this way. So you can see I don't have very much give here. You have a little bit more along the vertical grain, but if you pull on the bias, you have quite a bit of stretch. I don't want to distort my piece too much. But what Mary Ellen's Best Press or pre-starching your fabric is going to do is get rid of that stretch. So when you cut something on the bias, your fabric won't distort as you're trying to sew it. Now, if you're new to Mary Ellen's Best Press or you don't know what it is, it just looks like this and it comes in a spray bottle and it's basically a sizing. It's not quite as strong as starch, but it does a really good job. So if you have not pre-starched your fabric or you're working with scraps like I am and it's just hard to starch, this is a great way to go. But you just spritz one side of your fabric and then you just take your hot iron and just press it until it dries. And you can do it either on just one side or you can do it on both sides. Most of the time I'll just do one side, but if you want to do both sides you can. It gives it just a little bit more stability. And I would just recommend whatever you do to one of these pieces, you do to the other piece just for consistency. So since I did both sides, I'll do both sides here and I'll do that to my other ones as well. The other cool thing about Mary Ellen's Best Press is it won't shrink your fabric. So as you can see, I've already cut my pieces out and it doesn't shrink them at all like starch will. So that's also kind of a nice thing about that. All right, my pieces are all nice and dry now. They definitely have a little bit or less give on the bias. So that's given me a little bit more stability. And now I can take these to my machine and sew them and continue on with our next steps. So we're gonna take all of these pieces over to our machine, again, sew around all 4 sides using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so here are all 4 of our pieces. I've sewn all the way around all 4 sides, and now we just need to cut them on a diagonal. And I'm a little bit lazy, so I'm gonna cut 2 at a time. And I'm just going to line up my diagonal line here and just make sure my corners are lined up here and just trim in half one diagonal and then do the same thing going the other way. So again, we're lining up this diagonal. And for these, I actually give you plenty of wiggle room. So your sewing doesn't have to be completely accurate and neither does your cutting at this phase. And I'll show you that in a second. Anyways, here's all 4 of my half square triangles for each color. I'm going to set those aside and do the same thing for our other 2. All right, now I have all of them so that my dark fabric is facing up because I'm going to be pressing towards the dark on all of these, and it's just a lot easier when I go to grab them. I'm just going to set those seams, which I kind of already did because I pressed them before I cut them. I forgot to tell you that part. And then I'm just going to grab one and just press. And I don't know if you can tell, but my Laura Star makes these so flat right off the bat. It's just incredible. I love this iron so much. You do have to be a little bit careful that you don't accidentally press something the wrong way, because with this steam, it just presses so easily. And by the way, if you didn't Mary Ellen's Best Press before you started, you actually can even still do it now. You can just take all these, just spritz them, press, 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 press. So you can really do Mary Ellen's Best Press at any point during the process. All right, so all of our half square triangles are pressed. Now we need to trim them down to the correct size. And I've given you quite a bit of wiggle room. I gave you about a 1/2 inch extra wiggle room so that even if your sewing isn't perfect, you can trim them down so that your half square triangles are perfect. So here's our starting piece. And we are going to use one of our square rulers. It doesn't matter which. I'm going to go ahead and use my 3.5 inch square ruler. We need to trim these down to 3 by 3. So we're going to line up this diagonal line right along that seam line. I'm also going to line up the points right here along that seam line as well, and we need 3 by 3. So this is the line I'm going to be looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off these two sides like that. We'll pick it up, turn it all the way around, and now we can use this as our guide. So I'm going to line up the side, the bottom with the 3, our diagonal line, and again this point right here as well. The point's usually the one I'm paying the most attention to. That way my half square triangle will come out perfect every time. So I'm going to go ahead and trim all of our half square triangles up, and then I'll meet you back here for assembling the block. All right, I've trimmed up all of my half square triangles, and now it's time to assemble our block. And I'm just going to set these over here to the side so that I can assemble them paying attention to my pattern. So I have my pattern just right over here on the side. And just because this block is a little bit crazy and easy to get your half square triangles going the wrong way. So I'm going to put out my corners first, and in mine, and you can do yours any way you want actually, but in mine I have my pinks going out towards the corners. The next one I'm going to add is my red, and again I'm looking right at my pattern over here to make sure that I have it going the right way. So the red, the red, the red, and the red. Next we're going to take our dark green, and the dark green is going to go this way and this way. All right, and then our light green, and our light green is going to be going this way. Now what I may want to do here is see if I can have my stripes going the same way, because I chose a striped fabric, and that will work out. So I'm going to put those two together, and then hopefully these ones will match as well. And they do. Okay, so here's our star. Now these are just all half square triangles. You could literally put them in any formation that you want and completely change this design if you want. I thought this would be kind of a cute little wheel looking thing in the center with extra little fan blades. So I'm going to go with this. The other thing I wanted to mention is that on my blog and here on YouTube, I have a half square triangle tutorial, and it has information on how to make all different kinds of half square triangles. There are 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 4 at a time, and 8 at a time instructions. They also have cutting instructions for exact measurements and wiggle room measurements, which is what we used here. I personally like using the wiggle room method because that way I have a little bit of space where I can trim my half square triangles down so they are all perfect. You could also use triangle rolls on a paper if you like paper foundation piecing. So there's a lot of options with this block. I'm going to chain piece my block, which means I'm going to take this second row, I'm going to place it right side down on top of my first row and just sew all the way down without breaking my threads in between. I'll open it up, come back and add this row, come back and add this row. And that's just a great way to keep everything in order, especially with a block like this, so you don't accidentally have something getting turned the wrong way, which is super easy to do, especially when you pick it up and move it over to your machine. I'm adding a pin, not only to hold it in place, but also that pin is going to direct me on which side I need to be sewing on as well. Because again, when you get over to the machine, a lot of times it's easy to get these twisted. So now I'm going to go and take them and sew right down this edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, I'm going to chain piece so I'm not cutting my thread in between each of these. All right, so here is my first row. They're all together. And then I'm just going to press them open. I'm not worrying about which way I'm pressing right now. I'm just trying to get it so that I can see them all. If you would like, you can press this row first. Totally up to you. If you do, I just would recommend, and the pressing instructions are in the pattern as well. But I'd press this top row to the right, press to the right, and to the left. That way when you sew these rows together, all your seams will nest. So we're just going to press this seam to the right. I'm going to press this seam to the left, this seam to the right, and this seam to the left. And then now you can see with our seams going opposite directions, when we sew those rows together, they'll nest nicely. Okay, now we're going to grab this next row and do the same thing. So I'm just going to flip it to the right. Now one thing that you may notice here, and this is my fault, I actually just pressed the wrong way, but is that both of these seams were pressed towards the dark. So the red and the green are overlapping. So all I'm going to do is just change the way that I pressed that seam really quickly. I'll hold it down at the sewing machine and then I'll fix it when I come back to press it. This one is going to be fine because our greens are opposite. The green is here and here. So I'm just pressing down to nest those seams. And I'm going to put my pin down here on the bottom just so that it holds those seams in place, because this is really the part I'm caring about. I want to make sure that those points are all coming together. And then this one we're going to have the same issue. So since this one's already sewn in, I'm actually just going to repress this. I'm going to do this one while we're over here because I just pressed my red the wrong way. All right, now when I place that right sides together, my seams will nest. Okay, and then we can just take this to our machine. So 1/4 of an inch, again, I'm going to chain piece. We'll press that and then come back and add this last row. Again, I just wanted to make sure that I'm pressing my seams all in opposite directions. And now we're ready to add our last row, and we're going to add it the exact same way. So let's take a quick look at my stitching update. Obviously I've stitched ahead, so I am covering that up so there's no spoilers, but here is our stitching for blocks 1, 2, and then today's release for block number 3. I'm having a lot of fun stitching this, and I'm finding that it's really easy to do. You can do one of the blocks in an evening, and so it's really easy to keep caught up with this stitching. And then here's all of my floss. This is the Classic Colorworks floss. I used the Classic Colorworks. And then here's the DMC alternatives that I chose. They're a little bit different and brighter than the Classic Colorworks, so it's kind of two different vibes, so you can choose which one you prefer. And honestly, I really love how this is turning out, but going back, if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably just stick with my tried and true DMC, and I would for sure, I mentioned this last time, but I would for sure use a lighter brown to contrast with the cocoa bean so that you could see these edges just a little bit better. I am using a DMC Charles Craft 14 count Ada in the antique white colorway, and I think it's pairing really nicely with my floss choices, and it looks really cute. And now you're going to be able to start seeing what that quilt is going to look like as well when it all comes together. But here's our stitchy update for today's block. All right, everyone, that is it for today's tutorial for block number 3. I think it turned out really cute. I hope you enjoyed this block, learned something new. If you have any questions, make sure to leave those below. I'd also love to hear what colors you're using for your sew along for this year. Are you going scrappy? Are you doing something patriotic, springy? There's so many options with these Sew With Me quilts. So that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to join our Sew With Me group. That Facebook link will be below, and grab your free PDF that will be linked below as well. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will see you next month for block number 4.